From the moment that this movie was announced, I've talked about how it needed to put its best foot forward if there was any chance it could repair the damage that WB has done to this brand and this fandom. And yet at every turn, it seems like this movie and everyone involved with making it is doing everything in their power to do the exact opposite. I've talked about how the rollout for this movie has been so awkward that it almost feels like sabotage. Just one big troll job orchestrated by the studio and led by James Gunn, with the ultimate goal of either directly or indirectly driving this brand even further into the ground. With every explanation, every reveal, and every leak, my interest in this film as a longtime Superman fan has dwindled. It's almost to the point where I'm completely exhausted by this movie or any conversation around it. But when you have a leak this big and potentially this devastating, I have to talk about it. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Now, I know that some of you will find this hard to believe because you boil everything down to fan war bullshit. But at the end of the day, all I really want is what is best for DC, the brand that I love. And I've been 100% honest from the beginning, and I'll continue to be honest when I say that I do not think James Gunn is the person to give me what I want. I was not a big fan of his work prior to him becoming the head of DC Studios, and I've always believed him to be a mediocre at best filmmaker who got lucky and rode that Marvel hype wave all the way to the top. But still, even believing all of this, even saying all of this, I was willing to give him a chance to prove me wrong. I was willing to give him the opportunity to take some chances and not fall back on his typical brand of juvenile comedy and below average storytelling. And this is why I was genuinely surprised by certain aspects of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I mean, you could see the typical James Gunn bullshit in there, but I saw something in the Rocket story contained within that film that made me believe that he could potentially be capable of something more. Unfortunately, everything I've heard from him since then, and everything I've seen about the Superman movie so far, makes the Rocket story look more like a fluke than it does a trend. This man already made a DC movie that was damn near unwatchable, and yet people still glazed that project because they desperately wanted to see a Marvel guy take over at DC. And they didn't want to admit that he failed on his first time out. And that, my friends, was enough to convince the clowns at WB that James Gunn was worth going all in on. It wasn't because of his talent, it wasn't because of his work, it was all to support these bullshit online narratives.
It's true.
Over the past week or so, all of these reports have come out in regards to the test screening reactions to his Superman movie. And like everything else that has to do with the DCU, we continue to get conflicting reports. We don't know what to believe and what not to believe. And to me, that in itself is a sign that James Gunn's Superman movie is divisive more than anything else. And the last thing DC needs right now is more division. Reports from these test screenings include Superman, quote, having no real central plot to speak of, which makes sense considering how convoluted James Gunn's explanations have been up until this point, and how messy and jumbled this movie already feels as they continue to add different characters and plot lines to it. There was also a rumor coming out of these test screenings that the Superman movie has some unique plans for Jimmy Olsen, something that was kind of confirmed in these later leaks, if those leaks are in fact true. Jimmy Olsen, the ladies' man, has women fawning all over him in this movie, apparently. Sounds like a far cry from the Jimmy Olsen that real DC fans have told me they've been waiting for years. And then we had a report from another scooper who either saw the film or knows someone who did, calling it a divisive film with a silly tone. Some people click with it while others didn't. Now you could say that a silly tone would be welcomed after the previous incarnation of Superman. But does it not seem counterproductive to go from one extreme to the other? If Man of Steel was considered divisive, then why wouldn't Superman get the same reaction, just in the opposite direction? I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to try to find balance in a new Superman movie? Try to find a common ground, rather than alienating half of your fan base or more?
That makes sense.
Now, some people will respond to that and say, well, Superman should be silly. And I would respond and say, well, maybe that worked at one time, but there is a reason why these characters continue to evolve over the years. There's a reason why we get fresh interpretations both in the comics and in films. And that's because if you continue to do the same thing for too long, eventually it will feel stale and outdated. You see, I'm sure WB and James Gunn see going back to a silly tone as going back to something that worked before. I see it as them setting the character back a few years more so than he already is. A silly tone is only as good as the audience who is willing to accept it. If you can't find a strong enough audience to embrace that tone, then you are going to be running into the same problems that you've been dealing with for years, only to a different degree. Just hiring someone to come in and do the opposite of what the last guy did is not the answer. Here's a question: does it work in politics when one party is elected 4 years after the other and undoes everything that was accomplished in those previous 4 years? It's a very counterproductive way of doing things, and ultimately it accomplishes nothing. And then we have the big leaks, which came out just hours before I was making this video. And I'm not going to go through these leaks line by line, they're out there if you want to see them. But based on everything I'm seeing, if they are in fact real, it sounds more like a kid playing with his action figures than a legit Hollywood film. If these leaks are true, it's pretty much everything that people feared and then some. And it does absolutely nothing to inspire confidence in whatever the that James Gunn and WB are doing with this brand. Now, obviously, it could feel different if in fact it does play out this way in the film, and we see it in real time, and some context is added. But if James Gunn's past work is any indication, there is no guarantee that we will actually get that context that we need to make this work. The things that jumped out to me most about these unverified plot lines are as follows. There is a strong political metaphor where Lex Luthor is basically a stand-in for Elon Musk. And it also features two countries which I guess are supposed to be Russia and Ukraine.
Message!
We also have a Guardians of the Galaxy stand-in called the Justice Gang, a quirky group of characters that James Gunn apparently needs in a story to feel inspired. We also have an animal cruelty plotline, where Luthor violently beats Crypto and then traps him in a pocket universe where he also keeps his ex-girlfriends who he doesn't like. We also have Jimmy Olsen sexting Luthor's girlfriend, and apparently the lewd pictures end up being the key to uncovering confidential data.
Tits. Whew.
And last but not least, we have an appearance from what can only be described as drunk sorority girl Supergirl, which I'm sure rivals drunken Aquaman lying face first in a puddle. Now I know I'm going to get called a hater by some of you, but what part of this is in fact restoring DC or Superman to its rightful place? Some of this sounds like a god-awful SNL sketch, or what I have affectionately called a parody based on some of the costume decisions. If this is real, and WB better hope that it isn't, it does not sound like the work of someone who is taking the responsibility he has seriously. Now the rumor that Superman actually says "I'm Superman, bitches" in the movie doesn't sound so far-fetched, does it?
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Heavy-handed political metaphors, juvenile humor, retreads of past James Gunn characters and plotlines, retreads of non-James Gunn past characters and plotlines, and of course, sexting and nude pics being crucial to the plot. I mean, what the f*** are we even doing if this is in fact the movie that WB greenlit? If this movie ends up being anything close to what these leaks suggest, then WB might as well just sell itself, or at the very least, sell DC to a company who is going to take these characters seriously. Because this right here would be absolutely embarrassing if this is what they release in theaters in July. And please don't tell me to wait for the movie when we have bullshit like this dropping what seems like every other day. If you don't want the perception of your movie to be ruined, then stop revealing so much, and for the love of God, stop all the leaks. This is on WB and James Gunn to right the ship. It is not on me to give them the benefit of the doubt. They have not earned it. Leaks like this are precisely the reason why giving them the benefit of the doubt is damn near impossible. Because everything we hear, everything we see only serves to paint a much more bleaker picture as it pertains to the future of Superman and the DC brand overall.
Y'all be cool. Right on.